ranking the Giants' 5 trades at the deadline from worst to best. You knew the Giants were going to be sellers. You didn't know just how committed they were going to be to the sale, though. As it turns out, pretty danged committed. Now this was a trade deadline with some spice.
Love watermelon but hate the sticky cutting mess? This compact 2-in-1 tool slices neat cubes and flips into a retractable fork for easy serving at parties, picnics, or home. Want to get the best verified deal and see full details? Visit grabdeal.us/3 right now.
Remember the season you spent months wondering what the Giants were going to do at the deadline, only for them to present you with a single A.J. Pollock, like a cat leaving a wounded bird on the doorstep as a gift. Advertisement, you've earned this kind of deadline, and with any luck, you'll still be unpacking this sucker in 2036. Let's rank the trades then, if only to show off how there aren't a lot of wrong answers at the top. It was a deep and varied deadline for an organization that needed exactly that to make up for a miserable season. We will start with the only head-scratcher of the bunch, though. Braves get Tyler Mahle, Giants get RHP Anthony Molina. This was an ominous deal to kick off the deadline. The Giants were in an enviable position at the top of a seller's market. They were one of the only teams with starting pitching that was guaranteed to move, so teams didn't have to worry about last-minute surprises or changes of heart. Just hours before the Mahle trade, the Rays gave up a relatively hefty package for another starting pitcher rental, Freddie Peralta. Maybe the Giants were going to do something similar with Mahle. Instead, they got a reliever with major league experience. Molina's strikeout rates aren't impressive, and it's not because he's a sinker baller. He doesn't have a baseball savant-tickling pitch that coaches can dream on, a high-spin curveball, or a fastball with induced vertical break, or a gyro-knuckler, or a what have you. He is, in almost every sense, just a guy. His upside is somewhere between Anthony Molina and a healthy Jose Butto. The Giants were excited to add Butto to the bullpen last season, even though he didn't have a repertoire that stood out. Since then, the organization's ability to construct a functional bullpen has been called into question. So it's hard to match their excitement over another right-hander with a high walk, low strikeout, moderate stuff profile. The deadline improved quite a bit from here, though. Padres get Robbie Ray, Giants RHP Miguel Mendez, INF Joniel Hernandez. A couple of things can be true at the same time. This was the Giants' fourth-best trade of the day. This was still a very, very good trade relative to pre-deadline expectations. Rental pitchers are volatile market. It was a different front office, but the Madison-Bumgarner stagnation from the 2019 deadline is hard to forget. Sometimes teams just don't want what you're selling. Even considering all of that, Ray's value was more confusing than most. His ERA, 3.08, was sparkly, but the underlying metrics, 4.42 expected ERA, suggested it's been a mirage. That's a pretty big discrepancy, so it was hard to tell if a team would trade for him as a potential Game 3 starter or as an innings sponge to help them crawl over the regular season finish line. The return suggests a pitcher that was in demand for a lot of different postseason rotations. In exchange for 10 starts of Ray over the next 2 months, give or take, the Giants got 2 prospects worth dreaming on. Mendez has spent most of his season in Double-A, although he's rehabbing a shoulder injury in Low-A right now, and his arm is unquestionably of major league quality. The off-speed pitches need work, but it's a fastball that should flummox hitters for a long time. If he stays healthy, it's hard to see how Mendez doesn't at least make a Giants bullpen one of these years. Hernandez might be the most fascinating addition of the entire deadline, a both-cheeks swing of an acquisition that might take the better part of a decade to connect. If it doesn't work out, it'll remind you of every other teenager-for-veteran trade you've already forgotten. If it works out, though, the Giants will benefit from the karmic redistribution that the Padres have had coming to them since they acquired Fernando Tatis Jr. for James Shields. It's like how Brian Reynolds was the actual player to be named later in the Javier Lopez trade, if you're thinking on more of a cosmic timeline. Advertisement Hernandez was signed for $1.4 million out of Cuba this January, the prize of the Padres' international class. The odds are against him, just like they're against every prospect who can't legally vote, but it's hard not to love the quick hands and raw tools. Now remember that this haul began with Mitch Haniger and Anthony DeSclafani signing multi-year contracts. And you thought that those deals wouldn't work out. Red Sox get Eric Miller, of Carlos Gutierrez. Giants get SS Marcelo Mayer. The goal of the Giants is to get into a position where they're trading away prospects you love for unfamiliar relievers you can't trust. Eventually, they're going to need an Eric Miller-type pitcher in the bullpen, and they'll make moves to get him. You will hate those moves, but that's the painful luxury of following a contending team. Until then, here's exactly the kind of trade that a team like the Giants needs to make when it's offered. If the pessimism from the Red Sox is justified, Mayer might be a future utility infielder, and the Giants just got a modern-day Mark Lewis. But we're still talking about a player who was one of the better prospects in baseball before last season. Check out this write-up from Keith Law, who ranked Mayer 28th on his top 100 list, a spot above Bryce Eldridge. He's 22 now and still has superstar potential. A 30-homer shortstop with plus defense and what should be above-average OBPs is going to be the best player on his team in most cases. And while enough baseball and IL time has happened since then to dim Mayer's star considerably, there's enough promise left in him to get Law riled up about the trade. The gambit might not work out, and in 2 years, you might wish the Giants still had Miller instead. The Marco Lucianos are always greener on the other side of the league. Still, it's an immediate infusion of young talent at a premium position, and there will be plenty of playing time available for Mayer with the injury to Casey Schmidt, once Mayer himself is healthy, of course. Advertisement and aside, before the 2025 season, I read a long discussion on a Red Sox forum by fans who were coveting Logan Webb. The general consensus was that as long as the Sox didn't have to give up any of the big three, Roman Anthony, Mayer, or Christian Campbell, that they'd be willing to make a deal. Including any of them was a non-starter, though. Prospect watching is a cruel, cruel hobby, and don't you ever forget it. Phillies get Luis Ariz, Caleb Killian. Giants get RHP Ramon Marquez. RHP Marty Gare. I'm an easy mark for a good prospect story, but Marquez's is one of the better ones in a long time. Consider that he was signed after being one of 10 pitchers who threw at a tryout for the prospect the Phillies were actually there to evaluate, couldn't actually be signed until a lot later than that, though, because he wasn't in MLB's system. That's how off the radar he was. Assumed that he would never throw as hard as other pitchers, so he built his entire repertoire around his plus-plus changeup and learned to pitch backward. Now he throws in the mid-90s anyway, but it rarely hurts to be proactive. The story's a delight, but the changeup is even better. Even if Marquez can't find a consistent third pitch that will allow him to stay in a major league rotation, the fastball changeup combo will give him a chance at a long bullpen career, the kind with 9-figure contracts and his own entrance music. Gare is a gigantic stuff-over-finesse reliever who can miss bats and targets and catchers' mitts and strike zones in general. If it all clicks for him, he might grow up to be Caleb Killian one day. That's not snark, but an honest assessment of Gare's ceiling. It's a reliever's profile, through and through, and it's also a reminder that, even though Killian had some memorable meltdowns at horrible times this season, he was one of the Giants' few off-season success stories. It wouldn't be a surprise to see Killian or Miller settle into comfortable late-inning roles with more experience and getting high-leverage innings in October, but the Giants might need to rebuild their relief corps 3 times over before they're contending again. They couldn't assume anyone was a foundational piece of a future, contending bullpen. Yankees get Heliot Ramos. Giants get LHP Henry Lalline. Keaton Kent Lalline isn't the best prospect the Giants picked up at the deadline, and he certainly wasn't the best young starter acquired by a selling team, either. Kent was a brilliant response to an explicit call for amusement-based transactions, but he might not crack the Giants' top 30 list next season, so he's far from a centerpiece. It was a quality return, but those aren't the details that put it at no. No, this trade belongs here because it's been missing from the Giants' organizational blueprint for decades. Ramos was a popular player, and the Giants could have kept him around for 3 more seasons and figured out what to do with them then. Jerseys would have been sold, gregarious post-game interviews would have been given, and good times would have been had at the ballpark. He was also, however, a supremely limited player whose value would never be higher. Right-handed hitting corner outfielders with brutal defense don't get long-term contracts unless they're 40-homer hitters, which Ramos was never going to be. The Giants also happen to have Victor Buracoto, with a similar profile and similarly impressive batted ball metrics, as well as Jonah Cox, whose speed and defense should get him close to Ramos' typical WAR numbers right away. In a neat little twist, the Giants also have Parks Harbor tearing the cover off the ball in Triple-A. If he were still doing that in the Yankees system, instead of coming over to the Giants in the Camilo Doval trade, the Yankees might have promoted him instead of trading for Ramos. The Giants should have outfield candidates, then, both on the active roster and in the upper minors. They didn't need a right-handed outfielder nearly as much as they needed more minor league starting pitching. And Lalin is a large human being, 6'7", who throws strikes and gets strikeouts with his left arm. It's cheating to play the "where would he have been drafted today" game, but it's also a lot of fun, so here's a guess: high in the first round. Up there with Giants' first-rounder Jackson Flora, even. Now they have both, and the near-term future of the organization's pitching is suddenly a whole lot brighter. It a cruel trade for the fans who were attached to Ramos, who made it easy to get attached to. But it was also the trade of a team evaluating itself harshly and fairly. The Giants should be able to find right-handed at-bats in the outfield, especially if they're willing to punt defense. They've been having a much more difficult time finding major league arms, though. And if the Giants ever have a parade down Market Street again, it's more likely that a pitcher with Lalin's ceiling gets them there than an outfielder with Ramos' ceiling. The unexpectedness and the riskiness puts this one at the top for me. The Marcelo Mayer trade was a no-brainer, and Ramon Marquez might be the best overall prospect the Giants acquired, but this was the trade of an organization that's capable of making an honest, dispassionate, and practical decision, and taking advantage of a seller's market. That's what they're going to need to be if they're the ones that are going to get the Giants out of the mess they've created. That seems a little better than an organization that screws up everything it touches, which was the book on the All Giants as of a day or two ago. It might be the book on them again tomorrow. It was a whirlwind deadline in all the right ways, though. Never forget that AJ Pollock deadline.